which thing do you end up like compromising? The storyline, the video quality, or the effects or whatever, or audio?
Oh, it'll be the storyline.
You will compromise
I'll compromise the storyline. Yeah, and this is where you and I differ so drastically because I know you are story focused and I'm like visually focused. So I want to understand a little bit more about what happens when you hit that creative block in your process. So you talked about how you kind of do that. What does it look like when you hit a block?
Pure agony. Hi, my name is Sharan.
Hi, my name is Ben.
And this is the Creative Odyssey Podcast.
We're here to talk about the creative process.
The good,
the bad,
and the ugly.
But more importantly,
we're here to create together.
Whether you're a creator, a dreamer,
or just curious about the creative process,
explore with us
as we figure out what it means to be a creative
and build a community
that celebrates the creative journey. Let's get started.
Yes, let's get started. Thank you, Sharan. Thanks, everybody, for joining once again, or welcome back, whatever the case is.
Glad to be here. Glad to see you here or listening to us. Excited to be here.
I want to give a quick shout out to our podcast sponsors, which are Grace Schlee and
Elizabeth Rana Singh, our amazing wives.
Our amazing wives, absolutely amazing. And we really appreciate your support, whether you're listening now or never listening to our podcast. You have our backs like all the time. So helpful. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about the all too familiar creative block. And I know that a lot of people, or most people, know what that is.
It's funny. Creative blocks should be considered familiar, but
familiar,
I think for creatives who are creating alone and just for whatever walls they have put up or whatever walls there are as far as barriers are for creativity, they usually just do it by themselves. Like I think about when I was growing up and like I was creating. And every time I would deal with a creative block, I had no way of articulating that. It was a term that came out like later on in life, like, oh, this is what a creative block looks like.
Oh, yeah.
So not to get too deep right away, but I really think that it could be completely subjective. But creative blocks are technically familiar to everybody. But.
Yeah, I think most people would know what they are, but like at least when they hear the term. But you and I were talking earlier, and I feel like my understanding of what a creative block is versus what your creative block is, maybe not even understanding, but just like, oh yeah, we know what that is. And then getting into it, it's like, hold on, I experience blockages in my creativity so much differently than you would or anybody else would.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think a lot of times they can be caused by so many different factors, stress, boredom, I don't know, just perfectionism. I feel like I particularly am perfectionist about so many things. And I've mentioned this before.
Yeah.
Just like everything I do is like, I feel like I need to have it perfect before I release it. So I don't know. Do you want to kind of go through what it means to you or what you've kind of experienced?
How about since you kind of mentioned that creative block looks different to you and me, how about you start?
Okay. Yeah. So I think that when I was thinking about this episode and like just creative blocks in general, I started thinking like, I feel like I don't have creative block because, and I'll get into it a little bit more, but my generalized understanding was kind of like you sit down and you have a deadline or you want to do something and you sit down and nothing comes, like nothing at all. Like you've heard of the all too familiar, I guess, the movies that are like writer's block. Somebody sits down, writes a couple letters, backspace, writes a couple more sentences, backspace, or the old typewriters where they take the paper out, throw it across the room.
Yeah.
But I think that was my very generic term, and it was not really how I experienced it. So I had to think a little bit, and I'm still kind of processing it, what it means. I think for me, because I've had a lot of freedom when it comes to creativity, I can create whatever I want, whenever I want. I haven't had a lot of deadlines. So if I don't feel it or like I start doing something and then I get bored,
right?
I think that is my creative block. I just get I just get bored. So I do something else, or I just don't even come back to it.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you're gonna do something else. Is that gonna be something else that is related to that thing you were trying to do creative wise, or completely different where you go deep into that? What does that look like?
So sometimes it's doing something else, and sometimes it's just like I'll go watch some YouTube videos or something. Or because I have different creative outlets, I'll go do something else creative. So an example would be I'm editing a video that I've shot that I was very excited about. And I'm getting into it, and you know the process where like there's just so much footage to go through, and you're like, oh, I got to cut all this out, or this is so much to go through. Or you get to a point where you're editing it, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't like the way this looks. And I'll just stop. And maybe I'll go back into it, try to tweak it a little bit, and try a little bit more to get it completed. And if I get too tired of it or bored or whatever, I'll just go do something else. And a lot of times that's going to my workshop, just tinkering around, maybe starting to come up with another idea, kind of following whatever passion leads me at the time.
All right, I mean, let's get into it. So, like, what does the conversation in your mind looks like from the point of ideation, right? You get an idea, and then to like, I'm guessing it sounds like you analyze the process to the point of the block. Yeah, let's walk through that. I'm curious.
Okay, so I'll take like Sound of the Day episode. A lot of times it's just all of a sudden, just light bulb. Okay, here's the idea.
Right.
And I'll start shooting some video shots of it. And then I'll be really going into it and get whatever I need. And then I'll download it onto the computer and I'll start putting it together. And this could be multiple days. Like I'll do the shots and then I'll go edit it the next day or a couple days later. And then I'll put it all together and then it won't look like what I want it to. And so I will just stop. So as far as like the ideation goes, I'm very just like go with the flow. Like I'm going with what I feel like is right now. But I also do it where I will take the entire structure, write it all out, like literally write it all out.
Okay.
And then I'll go to the camera and be like, okay, how would this look like? What would this look like? What I just wrote out, what would that look like videographically? And then I'll put that and translate that into whatever that's supposed to look like. And then I'll upload it onto the computer and then I'll edit it as I was expecting it should look like. And then if I'm hitting a block, I will not like what it's looking like. Like I will just be like, nope, that didn't turn out what my original feeling thought it was going to look like. And then I will just go do something else or watch YouTube, take a break. There's so many different avenues that I'll go down.
Okay. So I don't really care about if that's a good thing or a bad thing at this point.
Right. Yeah.
I think
we're understanding
Yeah. So I think what I'm interested in is like, okay, so you had this. Sometimes you said you go with the flow sometimes, and then at times you go with a plan.
Yeah.
Both times you have a vision of what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Technically. And then has there been times where you've written it down and like planned it out where it didn't look the way you wanted to?
I would say yes. I'll have the final product not be what I originally envisioned, but I've tweaked it and tinkered with it so many times that I'm like, this was the general feeling I was going for anyways, even though it's not exactly what I had originally envisioned. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So in that situation, I'm gonna go deep down now.
Oh, please.
But then
I like this.
Is it what's more important to you in that moment? Is it the storyline? Like which thing do you end up like compromising? The storyline, the video quality, or the effects or whatever, or audio, or anything else?
So you're asking what I'll compromise when?
when you say, okay, this looks somewhat okay, I'll put it out?
Oh, it'll be the storyline.
Okay.
It'll be actually, it could be any one of them.
But where do you go the most?
I usually will compromise the storyline. So
You will compromise
I'll compromise
the
the storyline. Yeah. And this is where you and I differ so drastically because I know you are story focused and I'm like visually focused.
I have a YouTube channel called Sharon Stories. So
Well, I would
easy.
hope that it's focused on stories.
It also in another story, but it also comes from this like personal journey of like constantly being misunderstood. It does not just talking about being in America in 17 years and having language barriers.
Yeah.
It's just I've always found that as a creative, I've always been misunderstood by many people, but creatives. Little sidetrack there, but so you would compromise on the storyline if something is not hitting you.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to make sure that I'm being clear on that. Like I feel like in my mind the nuances that change are pretty big to me, but for anybody else it might not be like it'll be like that's generally what you're trying to do, right? And it'll probably look similar. But to me it's like, well, what I felt at the beginning, like that creative draw when you're first getting that idea and it's kind of just like that. I don't know, kind of like an endorphin rush. Right. And that draw, and you're like, oh, yeah, let's do that. And when I say let's, I mean, me, myself,
All
and
the
I.
minions in your head.
Right,
Yeah, for sure.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'll follow whatever that euphoria is. Yeah. And if at the end of the creative process it's not identical to what that was, I think the shift that would be the largest would be the storyline.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's easier to change the storyline than. Yeah, I get that.
Mm-hmm. I'll make my video cuts and edits work to switch the story up.
Okay, so then how about this? Because this is kind of personally, I'm questioning this. Is it the feeling, the initial like aha moment where it like drives everything and you want to create? Is that what we like? We follow that urge because that's what we drive to create, right? Yeah. But then all of a sudden, if the final product doesn't look like how you imagine it to be, then all of a sudden this initial high or initial acceleration is almost not valid.
I wouldn't say it doesn't invalidate that.
No. It's just like it does though, doesn't it? Because you had this rush to create something, this idea, and then you did all the work, and then because the final product didn't look the way, because the way you wanted to work, all of a sudden that feeling is invalid. So like, should we trust that feeling?
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, so it's weird to me. I don't consider that feeling or that rush to be like a North Star. I feel like it's kind of a starting point for me, a jumping off point. So it's like, okay, I'm getting started in this. Here's the beginning of the journey.
You started the car.
Right. Yep. Here we are. Here's the starting gun. Here I go. I'm going on this race. And whatever happens during that time, I still started, even if it's a little bit different than I had originally envisioned. I don't think it's going to necessarily, if I look back and be like, hey, my original idea was this, but I ended up with this, I don't think I'm going to be disappointed. Or like, I don't think it's going to really invalidate anything or change.
But then you are saying that when you are disappointed, that you don't even end up posting it or finalizing the creative.
So I'll clarify that too. When I get done with when I get that like create what to me is a creative block where I'm like, I don't like this. What I'm not liking might still not be related to the beginning, but it's to the way I'm feeling now with the entirety of it. And maybe I'm comparing it to just what I think it should be. And what I think it should be may or may not be what I originally intended.
But what's interesting?
This sounds like a bunch of gibberish, but I feel like a lot of artists understand.
You actually said something very interesting. You said, in the beginning, I have this feeling that makes me excited to go and create. And at the end, I don't have that feeling.
So yeah,
right?
Yeah, if I'm hitting that creative block,
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's very interesting,
Okay.
right? So you are trying to chase this initial feeling at the end of a process.
Yeah. Okay. That
The
makes
same
sense.
feeling.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I mean, because in the last episode, I talked about how either we just got to get good at like getting whatever we need to do creating wise. We need to make sure that our process is so much faster that way from idea to end is quick.
It's quick and it's
That's
done.
one way
Yeah.
to like solve this problem.
Yeah.
The other way, as I'm talking to, is listening to you, what I'm realizing is we almost have to create this other feeling, what it's going to be at the end and how we're going to react to it. This is not part of our story part, but as you were saying that, it almost seems ridiculous, and this is just us talking about it, to follow that initial feeling. Because the initial feeling was initiation, the ideation, the starting the car.
Right.
You can't have the same excited feeling when you're about to go on a road trip somewhere when you come back and turn the car off.
Yeah.
It's almost like, wow, like that was a really awesome trip.
Yeah.
Like
the whole experience was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We just like stumble. I feel like we just stumble upon something here. Like, don't choose the. I'm sorry for like taking it.
No, I like where you're going with this. Let's keep going with it because, yeah. So finish your thought.
So yeah. So I think what I'm understanding is when you have that initial thought of like I have this idea, there has to be some like second of thought. Okay, what's the feeling that I'm chasing at the end of this? What does that feeling? How does that? What should the feeling look like at the end?
Yeah.
Because at the end, this is like my whole process. Like since I kind of started the Sharon Stories channel, is what I understood was the ideation process, the idea, right? That's just a helping block or the initial part, and then the end should be whatever you end up creating, because it's this journal entry of your creative process at that moment, at that time.
Yeah.
So you almost have to create this other final feeling, have it ready to go. This is how probably I'm going to feel like, and I'm going to be looking back at the journey, not like what the initial final thing that I wanted to create.
Yeah.
Unless you're a movie company where you have everything.
Right, you have everything down. Yeah. No, that's a very interesting way to look at it. And it's so I feel like it's difficult for me to iterate all this stuff because it's just the way I create.
Yeah.
It's hard to actually put it into words how I feel and how the process actually goes through in my mind. But that's generally, it's this feeling that I just get, and then I chase that as far as it'll let me, and that could start to change. And then if I hit that block, I feel like in my mind, I get bored, I get tired, whatever the case is, I don't like what I'm looking at, I'll stop. And I will be frustrated or think I'm just going to come back to this later. I'll go somewhere else and do another creative process. Or one thing that I like that you've mentioned to me is splitting wood. We have a wood burner in our house, and there is something so cathartic about the process of sourcing, cutting, and splitting firewood and stacking it. And that kind of relates to this creative feeling story, where at the end I know what I'm looking for at the end, which is this beautifully like stacked pile of wood. And so I can understand what that looks like a little bit more than what I can understand what it should look like in the creative process. So if that makes sense.
No, that does. Yeah, I just completely went analytical on everything. So I guess I can talk about.
I was going to say I would love to hear your version of how you experience creative block.
Yeah,
and I can dive deep into that as
well.
Yeah.
So I think up until very recently, the process definitely has been exactly like how you mentioned it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you even mentioned, what is it? You chase the dopamine.
Yeah,
I love that.
I mean, one of the things about ADHD is like you find out that you definitely chase the dopamine. And so my biggest worry for the longest time was like, I gotta get this thing done before my dopamine runs out, because once it runs out, there is no way I can get out of it, right?
What
like
happens?
it's over.
It's just you're done.
It's done, right? And there's so many. That's why like I waited so long to start at this YouTube channel, because like so many ideas, so many things I've tried to do, but I never finished it because, well, for multiple reasons. It could be the editing process, which I just had this idea. Like, I don't understand how editing is the way it is. It does not relate to how a creative person edits in their head. Editing is literally putting like two clips right next to each other, cutting and pasting, putting ad. Unless you're like a collage type of person where you like take photos and like do something beautiful, like for a creative person, it's an actual nightmare to edit. Have you ever thought about that?
My perspective is no, because I've been doing it since I was like 10.
Okay.
So I don't know anything but the movie timeline. So to me, that is like, that's how it works.
But does it bring you joy?
Does the editing process bring me joy?
Or dopamine or whatever? Like,
yeah.
See, that's awesome.
That's different between you and me. And that's why we were talking about editing this episode that we're recording right now. Yeah. And our goal really is to like shoot and edit in the same day.
Same day.
Which it would be wonderful. But I told you I don't mind doing it after the process. And I feel like you're like, what, dude? I don't know how. Which makes a lot more sense. But no, I do enjoy it.
The long timeline freaks the heck out of me. Like, brings me so much anxiety. So, going back to my solution, I think that I've come up with is the storyline, right? So, when I have that initial dopamine rush or the ideation process, I quickly start working now. I start like writing down what the story might need to look like. And then I also like add all these kinds of thoughts. Oh, I could do this shot. I could do this. And like, it's not even like fully planning it, but like all these things idea dump into a piece of paper or the note, whatever. And once I feel like I have a decent story to tell and it flows, and I give it to my wife to look at it because she's editor and she does all this cool stuff. So then like we have an argumentative situation where she's like, oh, this sucks or this stuff, and I take out stuff and like I'm like, oh, I want to keep this to make sure, and you say, oh, cool. So
she kind of gives you her perspectives on some of the whatever you put
story
down,
yeah, because my problem is I'm not really good at like writing a chronological story.
Okay,
my brain just jumps all over the place,
which is probably why you dislike the video timeline.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. Nothing is supposed to work from A to B in my head. It's just not supposed to be that way. So my process is writing out the story now. You know, that's why I was running away from scripts for the longest time, writing scripts, and now I'm like, you know what? I need to write at least a storyline. That way I have an idea of what's going on. Like the whole concept of the log line.
Yeah.
You know, it absolutely is important to know that, okay, this is what I'm doing. And my question is, why am I doing this? So for me, if a story is worthwhile telling, that's it. That's the log line. This is a storyline that's worth telling, no matter how hard it's going to be. And the process got me excited because of the story. And then if I can add more videography stuff, you can add more like effects and cool angles and that kind of stuff. That's still part of the process, the second aspect to it. But
it's later on down the road for you.
Well, it's a second step. Okay. Like after writing the whole thing, and now I'm thinking about how can I do this? How I don't draw the storyboards, but I like at least think of ideas how I can do it. And I can even use ChatGPT to help me those kind. Once I type it out, like I'm like, okay, give me something here, and like I read out the angles. I actually want to do this, and I get ideas. So like, what I realize is I'm an individual who can lead people, who can guide people, but I'm not a doer. I suck at doing alone.
Interesting.
People motivate me. Brainstorming, ideation, like talking to you about this stuff, this idea just came out to me, right?
Yeah,
like,
and you go and go and go. I feel like when we're together, you definitely...
Exactly. And that's, I'm craving for this time because I need to like talk to you about this stuff to get brainstorming going. So because of that, I decided to like come up with this fail-safe method of like, okay, I have to write the story, and then if I don't have my wife to talk to, I'll talk to ChatGPT. I talk to ChatGPT quite often, just to like pick the brain to understand. Like, I know it sounds messed up. I can't wait to
ChatGPT, the best wife.
Nope, nope, not happening. But it helps me like get my brain thinking. Because it does what talking to you does to, pretty much.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, so that's when I write all the angles and all the final stuff. But here's the kicker. The log line is to tell the story. So at the end of the day, no matter how bad it looks, I try to get my shots good without bad exposure and all that kind of stuff. That's the end of I'm going. I make sure the shutter speed's all accurate. That's literally all I do. And then I just get a cool angle, and that's it. So the log line is that, so therefore I have to finish it because the goal is to tell the story. So I think I've kind of like gone from chasing dopamine to like, okay, dopamine can be also here, even though if it doesn't look that bad. I send the copy to you, I send the copy to a bunch of people, the video, and they will give me their opinion. But at the end of the day, I'm like, all right, I've taken some of these ideas and I've made the changes, and this is it now. I have to post it.
Yeah.
It's a scary feeling. You go regret things all the time. You, as a creative, you go back and like, I wish I did this. I wish I did that. And now I'm like, I do, but then how can I add this process to make it better?
Yeah. I really appreciate the way that you do things. And since we've been creating together, I feel like you've helped me just put stuff out as is, because the process of you talking to other people and then putting it out and then seeing, okay, I could have done this better and doing this better. I feel like I do all that before I release it. So my releases are like, they take forever to actually get out.
Yeah. And it's sad because like if I found your videos much earlier than we were friends, like I would be like, dude, this is cool. Right? Like, and I do that with so many Instagrammers and creators now, because I'm like, I just want to say this is cool. That's it. There's no intentions behind it. Like, you finished it. Great job finishing it. Like, this looks like a really tough process. Like, now that's what I like appreciate mostly about people. Like, I love the cinematography, but I love the fact that they went through the process of that creative, journey.
Well, so I want to understand a little bit more about what happens when you hit that creative block in your process. So you talked about how you kind of do that. What is it? What does it look like when you hit a block?
Pure agony.
Just pure agony. So you just stop and you start crying and...
Well, I don't cry. I don't cry. It's just I go through this previously practiced bad habit of imposter syndrome, of like, what the heck are you doing with your life? Like, nobody wants to see this crap, like all of this stuff. I still struggle with that, but I think again now it's a lot more different because I have that log line, meaning the story is the most important. I have to finish this out, not because there's a deadline, not because I'm going to disappoint anybody else or myself. It's literally the log line is, this story is so important for me to say something, or even like get this idea to say something. I have to finish it for that purpose.
So maybe your creative block would be, or when you experience it, would be early on in the process when you're writing stuff down before you even start creating, since you know you have that log line.
My creative block comes immediately when I'm like, okay, how should I tell this story? That's when it comes. And unless like I have something, like, and we will talk about this, but like I think I actually kind of gone out and like started writing like random stuff. Like, this is what I want to say. Like, and I just take multiple pieces of papers. Like, this is what I want to say. This is what I would like to have, and all these things. And then like I have all these pieces of paper everywhere, and then I'm like, okay, I'll take this from there, this from there. I want to start doing that on a whiteboard with sticky notes. I feel like that would be super helpful as opposed to just pieces of paper. I heard somebody do that. Like, I heard somebody, a famous writer, he did film scripts and books. That's how they do it. They're like, all you need is a couple of sticky notes and come up with a plot. And so they literally this table, and they would like, okay, this is the beginning, this character and this character, and this is what's gonna happen. And then if it doesn't work, you keep moving it. Way before they write the whole thing, they know the final thing. And I've recently just been watching a lot of people talk about creativity, obviously, and it's blowing my mind because it's like nobody is doing it willy nilly just because they got an idea. I think when you go through a creative process, especially understanding that you're a creative and what you're creating is important to you, I think that's when you're like, okay, I gotta figure out a process, what works, and the process that works. That way, this process of creation, right, the odyssey of creativity,
Yeah.
right, has to be the thing that you look back, not the inertia or the ideation feeling. That is part of it, but I really think that if we change our mindsets to say, let's look at the process and like what we did and what we accomplished, and the log line or the purpose for me in that moment was to tell a story. Did I tell this story well?
Yeah.
If I did this, then already that's the main thing. You achieve something that you try to achieve. So I don't know but the point is figuring out what works for you.
Right.
So like these are writers, how they have the sticky notes and moving things and whatnot. Same thing for me. I realized I need to have a whiteboard and like do this thing properly and find a space in my office to do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like that is something that I need to do, or I should do, or at least try.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like I'm kind of all over the place when I'm creating. And that's not a bad thing. You know, some creators, that's all they do and that's their best work.
Yeah.
But others might be able to have an even better product or find a better way to create if they have this log line or if they have this process and they can look back and be like, oh, I did it from A to Z and I know everything in between, and I was understanding the entire process and felt creative at every step of the way. I think that's where it's different for me is I have this big influx of dopamine at the beginning. So I get these ideas and then I just go after it and then it just kind of flows. And then I'll look back and I'll be like, I don't remember exactly how I did that, but it worked.
Yeah.
So, and so, I mean, sometimes the creative or the result at the end is exactly what you wanted. Sometimes for me, it's in limbo. Like I have so many things that I've started that I haven't finished. There's a lot of songs that I've written that I'm not ready to release, or they're not even close to being done. They're just ideas. I have tons of videos the same way. I do want to ask you one more question when it comes to, so we've been talking about you in videos. What does it look like for woodworking? Is it the same thing? Because I know it's not one-to-one when it comes to creating with woodworking.
No, woodworking is a whole nother beast. I've had times where the table saw would trip and would turn off, and I would be like, that's my sign to stop.
Oh, wow.
Because one, it's like exhaustion and things like that. Sometimes like they say if you're feeling exhausted, like stop messing around with tools. It's safety, right? And the other thing is like if I'm like overcoming, if I had overcome so many problems, and I've solved them, and like now this tiny issue is affecting me, like I couldn't figure out why the trip went off, and the trip wasn't actually gone off in the breaker, it was gone off in my table. Like I already have a power in my table, so like that I didn't even realize that was it, but I couldn't figure out it, and that was my moment like, okay, I'm gonna walk away.
If you can't figure that out, then there's no reason.
Right. But I think as far as woodworking is concerned, I'm completely different. I guess it's not. No, I have the no. It's not. I think it's the same way. I think for me, it won't have a storyline. So then I'm like analyzing the whole build. My biggest problem is if I foresee an issue, like, I feel like I'm like Tony Stark in the first movie of Iron Man, where he like has holographic stuff and he can put things together. That's how my brain works. So when I get an idea to build something, first of all, I analyze it as a business owner. I'm thinking about like, can I replicate this? There was a time where I wouldn't, if I can't replicate it easily, I just like, no, I'm not even wasting time, which business sense. But let's say I was just creating something else. I have to draw it. I have to like analyze it in my head. Like, and if I find a roadblock that like, I don't think I can make this cut. I don't have the right tools and I don't want to like, mess with it. I pause an idea.
So you don't even finish the idea, or
that's still in my head. The ideation.
Oh, I see. Okay, so again, it's early on in the process when it comes to roadblocks for you. Okay, interesting. Yeah, for me in woodworking, when I have a project that I know I'm going to build, I will usually put it on the computer first. I'll 3D. Yeah, I know what everything looks like. Again, back to the analyzation that I do, the heavy analyzation. I have like every single part ready to go. Yeah. And yes, obviously, 3D computer graphics is not one-to-one with actual wood structures. Close. So there's not even. When you get to the workshop, it's like, I cut this at the exact dimensions, but I forgot about this facet of wood and how it does this this.
Yeah, that's true.
So, anyways, that's how I usually do it. When it comes to woodworking, I feel like there's more of a tinkering aspect, creativity for me. So I'll just go in there and I'll just play around with stuff, and if something comes out, great. If not, that's fine too. When it comes to projects, like when I have commissions, obviously that's where it'll go on the computer first, make sure it looks good. If I have something that I want to replicate, like you were saying, I'll do the same thing and make sure that it looks pretty good from start to finish. But most of the time, it's just tinkering, and if a final product comes out of it, cool. Yeah. If not, all right, that's fine. I had fun trying.
Right. I think I realized like my tinkering phase is quite less now because of when it comes to woodworking, because I have to, every time I spend in the shop, I have to really think about if I'm using it wisely and things like that. So for me, it's like I don't even go down to the shop when I imagine these things. I just somewhere else, like picturing how to put it together. And
Tony Starking it up.
No joke. And yeah, it has to be feasible. It has to be practical. I'm not a creative person when it comes to wood. I think I like the art aspect of it.
Oh, okay.
Like Benjamin. Ben Ueda, I think his name is. He's modern something wood, or I forget the guy's name, but he actually messes around with. He's an architect. He messes around with different media like rocks and wood and metal and all sorts of stuff. And I would love to go inside his head and just watch him do things, because like it's just so brilliant the way he does it, and he tinkers a lot like that. He lives in somewhere in the desert, and he just grabs rocks and cuts them up and put wood together and like build stuff. He uses cement on top of that.
So cool.
Like it's super cool. So like I think I've gone away from that way to like, okay, I gotta, will it sell and all of these kinds of things. But I've kind of, sometimes I do like go and like carve something, tiny, and I don't show it to anybody just because I wanted to get away and like just focus on that.
Yeah.
So I think we all as creatives should have that mundane thing.
Yeah, just like that raw creativity where it's not gonna be shown to anybody, or even if it is, it's whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like I don't know the Instagram guy or YouTuber you're talking about, but I imagine he just puts stuff together and it can like result as this interesting sculpture of different shapes and whatever.
I think he does at first, because when he shows a reel, it seems like very straightforward. Like this guy, I want to show it. He built this like rectangular mold, and he put epoxy in it. But the difference was he put balloons with water.
Oh.
And then when the epoxy cured, he just popped the balloons, and he looked like a piece of cheddar cheese.
Yeah.
Not cheddar cheese, like the
Swiss cheese.
Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
And I was like, come on.
That is some brilliant creativity for sure.
But yeah, I think we want. I think we would like to go deep into how to get over creative blocks in our next episode, like on a really in-depth view, and I'm
or at least like you mean like solutions and stuff.
Solutions,
Sorry,
okay,
because I feel like we did a pretty good job at getting into blockages.
For sure. And we need your help. I want to shout out Joey Liberato, who we will share what he sent us, which talking about his mental creative blocks and how he gets over them and things like that. So speaking of which, we would love some engagement from you guys. Please let us know how you get over your creative blocks and how you define creative blocks.
Right,
that would be massive.
Yeah. I love to understand how other people understand just the topic of a creative block. Like I said at the very beginning, the way that we understand it sounds like it's on two different genres almost.
Right. And the beautiful thing is this podcast is not just for you guys. This podcast is for us too. I don't know. I think I'm my favorite. I love this podcast because I listen to it for creative inspiration. So the more we get from you guys and hear from you, the better for us as well to grow.
Yes.
Do you have the...
Yeah, I have it pulled up here. I'll read what Joey sent us. I think it's really cool and how he understands and goes through creative blocks. So he does a lot of music production and lyrical writing. And he says, in the realm of music production and lyrical writing, the way I have dealt with creative block is by simply embracing it. If I force my creativity when it doesn't want to cooperate, the art suffers by not being true to itself, becoming inauthentic. I like how he says the creativity is kind of like a being or something. It really kind of is. But so he was saying it's inauthentic if he forces it, and I 100% agree. If I'm trying to force myself into creating something, or just I almost feel like I start copying other people, and then it's almost to the point of plagiarizing. I'm like, this is not authentic creativity. So anyways, this leads me to a consuming stage. I digest either podcasts or new music more than usual, intake new perspectives and influences. I would compare this to creativity either being hungry or full. If the creativity is hungry, it has low energy and will not have much to offer, thus creating the block. If it digests new material and unique perspectives that it has not consumed before, its metaphorical stomach becomes full, resulting in an energized need to remove new ideas out of itself. What a great way to put it, Joey. I really appreciate you putting this out and sending it to us. And thank you for letting us talk about it on this podcast too. Very cool. I like how we have to remove ideas from ourselves. And that's really true. It's like you're birthing this new thing that hasn't existed before, or at least a new version of it.
For sure. Thank you so much for that. Our mission in this podcast is not just to be a podcast. We are two individuals who are completely normal and not have made it, trying to just create and do this for the sake of creativity. And what we realize is there's a whole ton of people who are like us who would love community, right? And so our mission is to help you get out of your comfort zone, whatever that creative situation that you're stuck in, to get out of it, get inspiration to create, and more importantly, to reach out and collaborate with others. This is the whole thing right now. This is what that is. And build a community on top of that. That's where you come in and share with us what your reality is when it comes to creativity. And if there's any way we could help, we love helping people, we love helping others, hit us up.
Yeah. Send in messages, share the podcast. I really appreciate all the love that we've received so far and all the shares and likes and stuff. So keep that up and definitely interact with us. We look forward to hearing a lot more from you guys.
So until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and keep exploring your own creative odyssey. See you.
Thanks, guys.